Welcome back. In this video, we will explore routines in classroom management. Classroom management is important for all classrooms, but in a special way, the multi-grade classroom. It is important to decide how you will manage various activities. For instance, what procedures will you follow for lining up your students? After PE, will they be asked to immediately start their work, or will you give them time to pause and reset? What about lunch? How will you structure that time? Will you allow your students to check out library books? If so, how will you know who borrowed what? What about homework? How will you ensure homework was completed? What procedures will you follow for that? Lastly, on this unexhaustive list is professional communication with parents and students. How will you communicate with your stakeholders? How you answer and react to these questions will help develop your voice as a teacher, a multi-grade teacher. Choosing a morning work routine is very important as it sets the mood for the day. It is important that you designate specific activities for your students so your day is as productive as you aspire it to be. What I did in my classroom was I had specific seat work for different grade levels. For instance, Pre-K had a coloring sheet. Kinder had a sight words handout. First and second grades worked on math drills. Third grade and up worked on reading for their AR goals. One year, all kids worked on a daily math sheet before they continued other allowed work. During this time, they were expected to work silently at their desk. What is paramount is for you to have a plan and stick to it. You may modify it as you discover a more productive way of doing things. However, it is absolutely crucial to have a plan. Another classroom management strategy I used was setting alarms on my phone for the various block times. Initially, I started using a timer, but found using the phone alarm to be more efficient and productive. When the alarm sounded, both I and the students knew it was time to move on to our next subject or activity. This strategy kept me from taking too long in one area and not enough in another. An absolute must in my classroom management routine was having background music constantly playing. The music was typically instrumental or soft. It helped create a calm, inviting classroom ambience. Speaking of soft background music, one of my favorite things to do was to allow the kids time to put their heads down on their desk while the lights were turned off so they could take a quick 1-minute reset break. This quick minute allowed them to regain focus and quiet their lively conduct, especially after an exciting activity like PE. In fact, I did this every day as part of my PE routine. A few things I did for my students to self-manage was I gave them a copy of my syllabus. It was used as a two-way communication. It let them know what they were responsible for, and they used it to communicate with me on what their grades were. This worked two ways. First, it made them accountable for honestly showing completion of work, and it allowed me to quickly verify on my teacher account the accuracy of the written score. Another way the kids used the syllabus to self-manage was to know which assignments they were expected to complete. This allowed them to move on to a particular area of study without me having to give them indications to do so. They chose to get ahead. Also, it allowed them not to have an excuse for not knowing which assignment was given. As mentioned in a previous video, whenever I assigned work not mentioned on my syllabus, I wrote it on a large calendar, which was visible to everyone. Everyone knew what was due and when. In addition to the syllabus, I also provided a breakdown of the schedule to each child so they could see what they were expected to do and when. This schedule was taped to their individual desks. Something I did to help me and the kids follow the schedule was that I made all the copies I needed beforehand. Typically, I copied months in advance, so I would not be pressed on providing the students with the necessary tools in order to follow the schedule. I had a file system that had 180 folders. Each folder represented one school day. All I had to do was make my copies and file them under the appropriate day. When that day arrived, all I had to do was pull the copies from that folder, and all the copies I needed for that day were done. I found this to be very useful. Other classroom management techniques I used were a classroom store for students to purchase items. They received money, they received pretend money, based on the number of check marks they received. Whenever necessary, check marks were removed as an encouragement for making better choices. I used popsicle sticks decorated by the kids to randomly call on someone, and I used a marble jar as a whole classroom incentive. I only gave marbles and never removed marbles. One of my favorite things to do was totally empty the marble jar into the container when someone passed a level in their reading selection. The excitement in the classroom when this happened was inspiring. The older kids congratulated the younger kids and thanked them for their contribution in filling up the marble jar. This greatly encouraged my littles to read more, and it encouraged camaraderie and courtesy in my classroom. As you continue to find and strengthen your voice as a classroom teacher, do not overlook your colleagues, whether they are colleagues who work with you at the same school or district, authors of books, or members of a teacher group you belong to. Glean ideas from them. Then, just as you do a recipe, make it your own by adding your own flair to it. Something I learned from one of my colleagues was to use a checkoff page. On this page, I listed all the subjects I wanted to quickly look over for completion. Notice how I said quickly look over for completion and not grade. Each child was checked off as the assignment was submitted according to the instructions given them. Once they were checked off, they earned the privilege of participating in recess. As you develop your classroom management routine, I would like to encourage you to keep one important thing in mind. You are an ambassador of God to your students. Whatever management strategy you choose to use, always invite God to guide you in representing Him, and He will ensure your success. May God bless your ministry in His vineyard.